Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Hello. Thank you for coming. As before I get into today's topic in the last of the series, I just want to get to the chat and just greet everyone. Hello there, Janie. Thank you for coming. Pleasure as always. I hope you're having a lovely weekend. Paul, good man, always here. Thank you. Well, good to see you, my friend. Hello there, Delilah. Thank you for coming. I hope you've had a wonderful weekend too. So I just really want to quickly recap on what we've been talking about. As you know, it's the Brinks-Mat gold bullion robbery. This is the last part. In the last episode, we was talking about a lot of it about the funding of the gold bullion. The proceeds was used to set up a lot of property development, drugs as well, invested in that. Also touched on the card scam where they were going to do card cloning. So at this point now, what I'm going to reflect on before I get into this topic is we're going to revisit the Adams family, the Adams crime family, because they were involved in sort of helping handle the gold bullion, distribute it allegedly anyway. And I'm going to go into the next chapter now, and it's going to go a little bit, branch off a little bit, and talk a little bit more about certain individuals. So as I say, thank you for coming, enjoying the show. And like I say, all this information that I'm providing is in the public domain. So across the river in North London, a bankrupt property developer and drug dealer called Michael Olombius had been borrowing a ton of cash from the notorious Adams family. When all Olombius's businesses had gone belly up a few months earlier, he fled to Cyprus to avoid his sinister bankers, the A-team. But as an old saying goes, you can run, but you can't hide. In 1996, Olympius slipped back into London to see his family. He agreed to attend a meeting in South London the night before he was due to fly back to Cyprus. As he got out of his car, a lone gunman fired a single bullet which went straight through his head. One of Olympius's failed property deals involved a Bellagio nightclub on Finchley Road, North London. The Adams family had turned it into the epicenter of their crime empire. At one time, the club had been sponsoring world title fights featuring boxer Chris Eubank and promoted by Barry Hearn, one of Britain's top promoters. When a tabloid newspaper exposed the club's links with the Adams family, Hearn immediately severed his sponsorship links. The A-team had carefully nurtured contacts in high places for years. In 1996, one establishment figure came under close scrutiny from detectives and MI5 officers trying to break the family's stranglehold on London's clubland. The man owned a private company that supplied the Adams family with an arsenal of weapons, including some machine guns from former Eastern Bloc countries. The same respectable individual had, it claimed, even become a member of the A-team's inner circle. Hello there, Baywatcher. Thank you for coming. Hope you have had a great weekend. In the summer of 1997, the A-team, MRE, good to see you. Thank you. Hope you've had a great weekend as well. The A-team had the front to put it around that they'd donated thousands of pounds to the Labour Party just before their historic election landslide in May of that year. Tommy Adams told associates he'd made several payments to the party through two henchmen, Michael Papamichael and Edward Wilkinson, both later jailed for the other Adams-related offences. But since gifts of less than £5,000 do not have to be publicly disclosed by political parties, it seems unlikely we'll never hear the real story behind these allegations. The A-team had also invested a lot of their dirty money in the world of horse racing through their old friend and associate, so-called businessman Brian Wright, who'd long since been fingered to the police as yet another villain linked to the Brinks-Mat laundering operation. Wright, known as the Milkman because he always delivered on time, had been linked to race fixing at meetings across the country. Organised crime investigators had kept an eye on him for years. Through Wright, the A-team were reckoned to have forged close connections to specific jockeys and bookmakers involved in race fixing. In 1997, yet another Brinks-Mat associate came to a nasty end in the classic Underworld hit. Scarface Danny Roth was one of the prime suspects in the 1990 murder of the great train robber Charlie Wilson in Spain. Roth's nickname came from a distinctive scar under his right eye and a liking for his heavy gold jewellery. Scarface had been involved in helping launder the proceeds of the Brinks-Mat, and there was already officially a strong link between the robbery and Wilson's murder. Roth, 36, had been paralysed in the spine after an attempt on his life and was in a wheelchair. As he arrived home in his Mercedes in Wanstead Road, Bromley, Kent, he began struggling to get out of his car. Just then, two masked gunmen ambushed Roth and shot him at least 5 times in the head and chest. As one old South London face said afterwards, Roth was always going to end up dying like that. He had it coming. He thought he was fucking invincible. Another Brinks-Mat source said Roth tried to keep a bit of the Brinks-Mat cash for himself later after a drug deal, and as a result got forced into carrying it out the Charlie Wilson hit on behalf of others. But Charlie's people got him in the end. And a few weeks later, Kenneth Noy encouraged the word to go out that, like Roth, he'd also been executed in a gangland contract killing. It was an attempt to take the heat off the worldwide hunt for him. But the stories were treated with understandable scepticism by the police. There was another rumour that Noy had travelled to Brazil to check out potential retirement properties. Others claimed that he intended to get plastic surgery carried out while he was in Rio before returning to Britain to live. But as usual, there was no concrete evidence whatsoever to back up these claims. Kathy McAvoy, wife of the incarcerated Mad Mickey McAvoy, reflected some of the rest of the gang's irritation with Noy when in 1997 she told this author, "He's a fool and an idiot. Only an idiot would do the things he's done. He was a fool because he allowed himself to be caught in certain situations." Kathy McAvoy claimed that Noy was not liked by the other members of the Brinks gang. He's been portrayed as a hero, but he isn't. He's nothing like that. He was no more than an offence. Kathy McAvoy would only agree to meet this author in a crowded shopping mall in Bromley in South London, as certain assurances had been made. She also made a point of hammering home the message that her husband and other robbers had little time for Kenneth Noy. He's just a load of trouble. Not even one of us really. A bloke from the suburbs who acted like he was from South East London when he wasn't, added Kathy. Okay, I'm just going to stop there. Hello, Richie. Thank you for coming. Appreciate you seeing here. Hello there, Co-Train. Good man. Good to see you. Okay. Right, I feel sorry for Brenda. He's left her to face all the music and it can't be easy. She's a lovely lady, she added. Kathy McAvoy confirmed that she had talked to the Underworld figures about Noy's disappearance and there was a collective feeling we'd just like him to stay away forever. The key to Kenneth Noy's survival was that all of his criminal associates, friends and family believed he'd been wrongly accused of the road rage killing, so they were willing to go to great lengths to help him. The crazed legendary associate Freddie Foreman summed up the attitude of many when he said, "Obviously, anything that goes wrong, any major crime that happened recently, Kenneth Noy is going to have his name put up in front." Noy and Tony White's brilliant brief, Henry Milner, whose legal skills continue to be used by many of the South East London's best-known criminal faces, handled all inquiries about Noy with great skill. But like everyone else, he said he had no idea where Noy had gone. By the middle of 1997, Brinks-Mat insurers believed that they had recovered virtually the whole of the original value of the stolen gold. But that didn't allow for the fact that 27 million had undoubtedly been turned into hundreds of millions through numerous successful investments by criminals. With Kenneth Noy on the run, John Littlelegs Lloyd in prison for the hole-in-the-wall scam, and McAvoy and Robertson still banged up, it was thought that maybe the Brinks-Mat trial would finally run cold, but the police presumed that the gang and its associates would put the brakes on their business opportunities and try to keep a lower profile. But greed always conquers brains in the end. Now, in late 1997, Brinks-Mat Cash helped finance an audacious plot to spring a gang of villains from inside a British jail. The extraordinary escape plan involved smuggling in quantities of Semtex explosives, blasting a hole in the jail wall and flying the prisoners to freedom by helicopter. One employee at the top security Whitewall prison in Cambridgeshire was arrested after an inmate leaked the escape plan to the prison authorities. Now, the key figure in the scheme was one of Kenneth Noy's oldest criminal associates, South Londoner George Cacavale, 56. He was serving 18 years inside Whitewall for his part as the leader of a 9-man gang, jailed for a total of 167 years at Bristol Crown Court in July 1997, after being convicted of being involved in a £65 million drug smuggling operation. Certain member of the Brinks-Mat gang decided to help finance the escape bid because Cacavale had been a loyal and trusted associate of theirs. But as one Brinks-Mat source explained, Noy and some of the others needed to get George out to recoup the original investment. They ploughed in millions into this operation and needed a return on their money, especially since the costs associated with their way of life was so high. We're talking about paying informants, safe houses, new vehicles, private planes. None of this comes cheap, explained one who should know. Nevertheless, it's a measure of the power they believed that they held, and they would even consider such a daring plan. In November 1997, 3 Brinks-Mat associates travelled by a private jet to the Costa del Sol to meet a gang of well-known drug dealers and armed robbers who'd agreed to acquire Semtex and hire a helicopter for the audacious escape plan. Now, the gang even had an informant working inside Whitewall who was prepared to smuggle the Semtex into the prison. The informant had been trapped into helping the gang because he'd been caught in a compromising position with a woman planted by the criminals. The same man was also smuggling drugs on behalf of other prisoners inside Whitewall. Following the anonymous tip-off, prison authorities foiled the escape plan just a week before it was due to be carried out. They had become particularly sensitive to such plots since 1994 escape of 6 inmates, including 5 IRA terrorists from the same jail. So as you can see there, that with the money still going around, they want to make a name for themselves. They've got a warden on the inside, which they feel that they can muscle in on and blackmail. They're going to try and break their associate Cacavale out. So that you can see the lengths that they go to with all this money and capital behind them. Now, the Brinks-Mat gang were furious. Until Cacavale was out of jail, their investments were effectively lost. So in late 1997, while Kenneth Noy was still on the run, he bought a £200,000 yacht in Cadiz in Spain and immediately subleased it out to various hashish gangs for the use of drug smuggling from Morocco. He followed this by an investment of £500,000 in a carefully planned hashish smuggling operation through one of the most notorious criminals in Gibraltar. Just 2 hours' drive from the Spanish hideaway south of Cadiz, Noy, using a false British passport, never once even had his picture ID checked by border patrol officers from either Spain or Britain. Now, it's the easiest border to walk through in the world. I've never seen police check the photo ID on a British passport, said one regular Gibraltar visitor, Anthony Bowman. No wonder Noy got through so easily. A Spanish police source in southern Spain revealed that British police in Gibraltar actually monitored a man later identified as Noy meeting local criminals around this time. The source explained, "This is very embarrassing, but there were so few up-to-date photos of Noy that the police in Gibraltar had no idea that the man they had video footage was photos of Kenneth Noy." Noy had been meeting an infamous Gibraltar criminal who was under constant surveillance because he was believed to be the mastermind behind one of the biggest drug smuggling cartels in the world. At that time, Noy had been using a false passport in the name of another well-known local British criminal, which further confused the situation. But the Spanish police sources added, it's highly embarrassing that British police were monitoring the most wanted man in their own country without realising it. However, the same source also confirmed that just a couple of months later, Spanish police also had Noy with their sights within their sights when they were monitoring the movements of the local girlfriend he had at the time, Mina Al-Taiba. She was under surveillance because she was a known associate of several criminals on the Costa del Sol, explained the source. Like the Gibraltar police, the Spaniards failed to recognise Noy. So although they wanted in his Britain also wanted him in Britain for a crime that had shocked an entire nation, he remained at liberty. Just before Christmas 1997, Noy made direct contact with one of the closest police contacts inside Scotland Yard. As one highly placed source explained, Noy was taking a hell of a risk, but he wanted to sound out the yard about what would happen if he decided to walk into a police station and give himself up. Noy was told that he would not get any special favours and warned the Kent detectives believed that they had conclusive proof of Noy's involvement in the road rage death of Stephen Cameron. Okay. Hello, Joe. Good to see you. Thank you for coming. Hope you've had a good weekend. Noy's call to Scotland Yard was from a scrambled phone line which prevented the police from tracing the call. But they believed the clarity of the line meant that Noy was definitely within a 25-mile radius of London when he made it. Many of the Brinks-Mat gang's closest associates in the drug world were not having it all their own way. Either so-called heroin king James Hamill was jailed for 18 years in February 1998 after being found guilty of running one of Britain's fastest-growing heroin supply rings. The police believe that some of the Brinks-Mat proceeds were invested in Hamill's operation. Hamill, 38, had aspirations to become one of Europe's most powerful godfathers, and he'd taken a lot of advice from two particular members of the Brinks-Mat gang over the years. Just 2 weeks before Hamill was jailed in Aberdeen, one of his closest associates, feared Glasgow gangster Stephen Doherty, plunged to his death from a high-rise block. In the high-risk, high-drug profit empires, life often came cheap. The Brinks-Mat team had been seriously considering joining forces with Hamill and his Scottish gang to supply virtually every type of recreational drug to consumers across Britain and possibly even into Europe. But they had pulled out immediately after Hamill's arrest. Kenneth Noy continued masterminding huge drug deals as he continued to evade justice. By early 1998, he was mostly settled in an isolated location on the Spanish coastline, just south of Cadiz. Noy boasted to his associates, that he decided to concentrate on smuggling hashish because he believed that the Spanish police were more concerned about so-called heavier drugs such as cocaine and heroin. At his house, Kenneth Noy, using at least two aliases, occasionally upset his neighbours. As a neighbour, Hugh Dunlop, explained, when I met Noy, he almost killed me because he thought I was a burglar after I jumped over his garden wall to talk to his gardener, who also attended my house as well. I was just walking across his lawn, and when I saw this man come out the back door with something glinting in his hand, I immediately realised it was a knife and stopped in my tracks to explain who I was. He put it down by his side immediately and then spoke to me briefly before suggesting I should leave his property. I would not say he was rude, but he was very menacing, and I only ever saw him one other time in the street as he drove past in his Shogun. Her Dunlop added, I realised he was not a man to cross. Noy became increasingly confident and that the authorities would never catch up with him. He even flew his own father and one of his blonde mistresses in from southeast London to stay with him during the early part of 1998. Noy was being very careful not to implicate his wife at the time, so she was deliberately kept off the scene. Their eventual separation was almost definitely prompted by Noy's desire to help protect Brenda from the fallout caused of the road rage killing. But the longer Kenneth Noy was on the lam, the more the feeling grew, and maybe some of his criminal enemies, including certain members of the Brinks-Mat gang, had decided that they were fed up with all of the unwelcome attention had been caused through his alleged involvement in the road rage killing. Okay. Hello there, Burnley till I die. Good to see you. Notorious Costerdale crime resident Mickey Green, described by Ireland's Criminal Assets Bureau as one of the world's biggest cocaine traffickers, had become so adept at escaping justice since his days as a notorious London armed robber 30 years earlier that he'd been nicknamed the Pimpernel by authorities. It was said that Green had evaded arrest on the Costerdale crime for a couple of years by wearing a disguise and using a false identity. In the 90s, he spent much of his time in Spain, having been released on a legal technicality the last time the law had got their hands on him. But Green was the classic Mr. Big. With alleged links to mafia and the Colombian drug cartels, he was a regular visitor to South America, where he nailed down a number of huge cocaine deals with successors to the most famous drug baron in the world, Pablo Escobar, who had been killed by drug enforcement agencies in 1993. Hello there, Deborah. There was even talk that Green had been one of the actual robbers who took part in the original Brinks-Mat raid. Green was using a lot of the cash that had been provided to him by certain members of the Brinks-Mat gang because they knew the vast profits could be made out of the cocaine if it was purchased direct from the source in Colombia. Green wasn't even in the slightest bit fazed by travelling to places like Medellin, a city that was virtually ruled by the Colombian drug cartels. When American DEA agents monitoring the big Colombian drug barons reported that a limey criminal had been in a series of meetings with gangsters, they passed on his name and their details to their colleagues at Scotland Yard. But there was nothing anyone could do without any more concrete evidence. It was also thought by detectives in London that Green should be allowed to continue setting up cocaine deals in the hope that he would lead them to other, even bigger fish. Now, Green always returned from his trip to Medellin looking as if he didn't have a care in the world. He believed he was untouchable. Hello there, Marta. Thank you for coming. Okay, his palatable hacienda just east of Marbella was worth more than 2 million, and he'd got a friend to live in the gatehouse and keep an eye on the property whenever he was on his travels. As one of the Costerdale crime associates explained, Mickey was from the old school. He'd done well for himself and kept him on his toes for much of the past 25 years. Good luck to him. Well into his 60s, Green had over the years been shadowed by British, Dutch and French authorities who suspected him of major criminal activities. There had been a rumour that he kept 1 million in French francs hidden in a box buried under a flower bed at his Marbella villa. Green's personal fortune was estimated to be at least 50 million. Michael John Paul Green was born in 1942 in Wembley to a family that originally came from Ireland. He was said to be your original Medellin man with a taste for birds and booze. He first made his criminal reputation in 1972 with a notorious London supergrass called Bertie Smalls, named him as the leader of the gang of robbers known as the Wembley Mob. At the time of the UK's most successful team of armed blaggers, Green was eventually jailed for 18 years for his part in a robbery of a bank 2 years earlier in Ilford that yielded £237,000. Although he was suspected of involvement in numerous other crimes, Green got out on parole after serving 7 years of his sentence and was soon back in the thick of things. He teamed up with old Wembley Mob partner Ronnie Dark, and they developed a lucrative VAT scam on gold Krugerrands. They bought the old coins, which weren't liable for VAT. They then melted them down into ingots and sold them back to the bullion house. collecting a hefty wedge of VAT in the process. It was reckoned that Green and his pals made 6 million in under a year. Green went on to act as a consultant to the Brinks-Mat gang and helped them set up their own VAT avoidance scam, which is believed to have added at least 10 million to the profits from the gold itself. But then Green was arrested by the Spanish police in 1987 after 2 tons of hash were seized in Barcelona. Green was mysteriously granted bail and fled to Morocco, leaving behind 11 powerboats and yachts that were allegedly used to run drugs from North Africa to Spain. When Green turned up in Paris, Interpol was alerted. French police swooped on his Swiss left bank apartment where the gold bullion and cocaine was, but there was no Mickey Green to be found. That gold was allegedly part of the Brinks-Mat consignment, and it was suspected that he was going to buy shipments of cocaine directly from the Colombian cartels. In his absence, Green was later sentenced to 17 years in jail for possession of drugs and smuggling. Green's next stop was California, where he rented Rod Stewart's mansion under an alias. A few months later, FBI agents knocked on his front door. They knocked it down and he was lounging by the pool and arrested him. Green was put on a flight bound for France and the jail sentence that was waiting for him, but he got off when the plane made a stopover at Ireland's Shannon Airport. It was unclear why it took him more than an hour for anyone to notice that it took them more than an hour to notice his absence. Using his Irish passport, he slipped past unnoticed past customs men and headed for Dublin, where he had many contacts. Green took full advantage of the extradition laws that existed between the Irish Republic and France, and at the time he then settled in Dublin. He even splashed out on a massive £500,000 farmhouse just outside the city. But then Green ran a red light at a busy junction in his Bentley and killed a local taxi driver called Joe White. Green was fined and banned from driving, but there was an uproar in the local press because he was not even given a custodial sentence, despite the death of an innocent man. Now, under mounting pressure, Irish police made it clear that they were planning to grab Green's assets, including his farmhouse property, so in a typical fashion, the Londoner disappeared. It was later claimed during another criminal trial in London that Green bribed 2 witnesses in the death crash course case to make sure he wasn't sent to jail. During the trial of Green's associate, Supergrass, Michael, a female drug courier, told the court that she and an Irishman were paid to lie about the car smash that killed Joe White. Shortly after leaving Ireland, Green turned up once again in Spain and simply carried on where he'd left off. Still apparently untouchable on the Costa crime, but the characters like Mickey Green really got up Mickey McAvoy's nose. He suspected that they were spending his share of the Brinks-Mat gold, even though McAvoy had made it crystal clear over and over again that he was fully expecting to be given all of his gold when he was released. Now, a beige 3-litre Vectra containing 2 Kent detectives and a Spanish officer headed slowly off behind Kenneth Noy's Mitsubishi Shogun as it began twisting and turning down the hill from his house into a nearby pueblo of Alantera, 70 miles south of Cadiz. It was late August 1998. The English police had been provided with a number of a mobile phone that Noy was using and used in the British security services to track it down to this area of Spain. Team Do, thank you for coming. Good to see you. Great show earlier. Two other vehicles, a Golf and an Astra, joined the convoy from different positions as Noyes hit the straight road out of the Atalantera through the Sahara and towards the larger coastal port of Barbet. As usual, Noy was driving at a very high speed, but all the officers were all confident he had no idea he was being shadowed. Noy drove through the busy centre of Barbate and headed onto a narrow road and ran through a forest towards the coastal hamlet of Los Canos de Meca. Minutes later, he picked up his mistress Mina from her rented beachside house, and the couple headed back towards Barbate at high speed. Behind them, detectives had decided that because the road was so quiet and the area was so sparsely populated, they would use only the Vectra to shadow Noy. The two other cars were driven separately back to Barbate to await instructions. But then, as Noy sped through the isolated forest road from Los Canos to Barbate, disaster struck. As one officer later explained, "We lost him at the second curve. He just disappeared. There was a crossroads up ahead, and he could have gone in any of the three directions." Instead of panicking, the detectives remained convinced he'd ended up in Barbate, so they slowed down and called to the other two vehicles to keep an eye on him in the town. For the following tense half hour, none of the investigators caught a glimpse of Noy's now familiar dark blue Shogun with distinctive Belgian plates. The officers began to wonder if perhaps Noy had been tipped off about their operation. It was 10:30 p.m. on a busy Friday night, and the reality was that Noy could have slipped through their grasp. As minutes ticked towards 11, it was decided that the three cars should float around Barbate in the hope of spotting Noy's Shogun parked up in the busy town. They prayed he had stopped to eat dinner somewhere. In fact, Noy's love of fresh fish had resulted in him heading for the El Campero restaurant right in the centre of Barbate. It served almost delicious cuttlefish, squid, bream, sole, dogfish, mackerel, sardines, anchovies and tuna. At 11:20 p.m, Noy and his mistress Mina walked hand in hand in front of the veranda of the restaurant, and they were seated at the corner of the table close to the pavement. Noy always chose such tables because if any problems arose, he knew he could slip away quickly. Just as he was sitting down, the three detectives in the Vectra spotted the Shogun. As they circled the square in front of the restaurant, they spotted Noy himself almost immediately. The officers radioed to the other cars to meet them in the street adjoining at the square, where they parked the two vehicles, the Golf GTI and the Vectra. So they agreed that they would have to act like drunks in order to get near enough to the restaurant to make certain that it was indeed Noy. The detectives bought a few litre bottles of beer from a nearby bar, got back into the Astra and double parked virtually in front of the restaurant. Then they began playing the Prodigy's Firestarter at full blast on the car stereo. As one detective later recalled, basically we were singing and shouting and acting like it was a Friday night out with the lads. Three of the officers then tumbled out the car and manoeuvred themselves nearer to Noy's table. They watched as Noy ordered a bottle of Rioja and a seafood salad. More of the officers then linked up from the other cars after being radioed in by the team, and that spotted Noy and began weaving their way back up the pavement towards the restaurant. Then four of the drunks surrounded Noy's table. Noy tried to ignore them in the hope they would go away. The last thing he wanted was a bit of aggro with a bunch of drunken British hooligans. One of the officers later explained, "I then dropped my bottle on the floor and leapt on him. There was a smash of glass on the table and I floored him." The detective got Noy in a painful headlock and fell to the ground with him. The two other detectives each grabbed one of Noy's arms, which they yanked up behind Noy's back, while a fourth officer handcuffed him. 18-stone Spanish police chief Miguel Fernandez later claimed he was the one that he had to sit on Noy, who was struggling fiercely in order to get him handcuffed. In the middle of all this, Noy's mistress, Mina, coolly got up and disappeared off into the night before the detectives thought to apprehend her. Four policemen literally picked Noy up off the floor and carried him back to the Astra. As the two officers got in the front of the car, Noy shouted, "Why am I being detained? I want to see my lawyer and I want to see a doctor." Minutes after the arrest, Noy was deposited at Barbate's small scruffy police station where charges were formally read to him. Noy was then searched. All detectives found was a cheap wristwatch and a wallet carrying 1.4 million pesetas, which was about £6,000 in cash. "What's the cash for?" detectives naturally inquired. "Spending money for the weekend," came Noy's sarcastic reply. Noy also had in the possession a checkbook with 5 checks signed to a man called Kerry Stuart Main, and a further check for 5,000 made onto a furniture company. Another checkbook was registered to Main. The fake name was used by Noy during his stay in Spain and even in a local bank where he'd set up an account. It also happened to be the same name used by one of Noy's main money men, who paid regular visits to Noy when he was out in Spain to keep him supplied with cash. The police discovered a passport in the name of Alan Edward Green, in which were found stamps showing he had visited Jamaica and Tangiers on several occasions. Kent police hoped the fake UK passport would ensure that Noy's extradition could be speeded up because it meant Spanish police would not pursue him under his real name. By approximately 2 a.m., just over 2 hours after his dramatic capture, it was decided Noy should immediately be transferred to a high security jail in Cadiz, 35 miles north of Barbate. Kent police knew all about Noy's friends and associates, so they didn't want to take any risks with their highly prized prisoner. Back in London, the notorious Adams family's power and influence seemed to be everywhere. At this time, the net was closing on Kenneth Noy in Spain. An official with the Crown Prosecution Service took a bribe from the brothers and leaked confidential information about them to alert about police plans to close in on the family. Mark Herbert, a £14,000 a year administrator officer working at the CPS headquarters in London, knew exactly who the Adams family were because his own father was a policeman. He didn't just limit his activities to warning the Adamses when the police noose might be tightening. Herbert also took the names of informants off a CPS computer file with a view to sharing them with his criminal paymasters. As Victor Temple, QC, later told the court, it needed a little imagination to anticipate what might happen if the name of the informants were to fall into the wrong hands. Fortunately, detectives intercepted handwritten and potentially lethal document. A court case in September 1998, which was just days after Noy's arrest in Spain, ended for once with a conviction and a jail sentence for a member of the Adams family. Tommy Adams was given a 7.5-year stretch for importing cannabis. In public, the police were delighted to have finally made a charge stick on the 18 member, but Tommy, chewing gum and laughing as he was taken down to begin his sentence, saw it in a different light. The police had confiscated 1 million in cash from Adams, but they hoped for at least 6 million. They were convinced that some of the money came directly from laundering the Brinks-Mat gold. But what got most of the London's big firms talking was the rumour that the rest of the 80 had allowed that prosecution to go through to teach wild man Tommy, who had been setting up drug deals without telling the rest of the family a lesson. The brothers went to see Tommy in Belmarsh prison. One Adams associate later explained, they told him they were dumping him because he'd gone behind their backs. He'd been caught freelancing and he was paying for it. They could have gone and bribed the jury 1 million, it's not a problem, or given him the bullet. So he's got off pretty lightly. Now, okay. So I'm just going to stop there. Tinu, good to see you as always. Good to see you, Burnley, till I die. Okay. Yeah, and Joe, just wanted to take a little breather just to... anyone got any questions at all that would like to ask me? No? Okay. I'm going to kick on. Okay. In early 1999, the A-team's influence in criminal courts returned with a vengeance when police went for a prosecution over a notorious torture case. David Mackenzie was a wealthy 46-year-old financier with an office in Mayfair in London's West End. Mackenzie laundered drug money for the Adams family, but his investments took a nosedive and he lost close to 2 million of the A-team's dirty money. Mackenzie said he'd been summoned to a meet with Terry at Terry Adams' mansion in North London in the suburb of Finchley for a discussion. He was later found beaten and cut up so badly that the detective said his body looked like a London Underground map. Patsy Adams' golf partner, Big Chris McCormack, 44 at the time, a close associate of all three brothers, stood trial at the Old Bailey, accused of causing Mackenzie grievous bodily harm with intent. By this time, Adams was privately acknowledged as the chief exec of the Adams family board. Mackenzie's courtroom testimony confirmed Terry's status as the main man. Everyone stood up when he walked in, Mackenzie later explained. He stood like a star. He was immaculately dressed in a long black coat and a white frilly shirt. He was totally in command. The Old Bailey jury of 6 men and 6 women deliberated for a day and were then sent to the hotel for the night with round-the-clock armed police protection. At lunchtime the next day, the enforcer was acquitted of the assault. As Big Chris heard the verdict, he turned to the jury and said, "Thank you," before adding, "Come and have a drink with me over the pub." Despite the acquittal, the case made the A-team realise that they were pushing their luck, and 2 of them headed out to supposedly retire in the Costa del Sol. At their peak, the A-team were rated as 10 times more scarier than the Craze. For now, however, their alleged connection to the Brinks-Mat Robbery was starting to cause them a lot of aggravation that they could do without. In May 1999, after many months of wrangling, Noy, who continually run his criminal enterprises from inside his Spanish prison cell, was finally brought back to Britain to await trial. After many months of legal wrangling, he was given the entire wing of the notorious Belmarsh prison in southeast London to himself because of fears he might escape. In a series of tape-recorded telephone interviews conducted inside Belmarsh, one fellow inmate said, Ken Noy was the king inside there. He knew many of the staff and the inmates already from where he previously served time. Some of them even knew him from his days as a petty villain in southeast London and Kent. It was like home from home. Another source revealed that Noy's boys inside Belmarsh prison boasted about Noy, how confident he was, and he was acquitted of the murder of Stephen Cameron. That had authorised his sidekick in Spain to continue paying a builder to finish off the Antolera Casa at Noy's very specific orders. Shortly after Noy's dramatic arrest in Spain, his wife Brenda sold their house in Sevenoaks to a Japanese businessman for £500,000 and moved to Cornwall. Noy had stepped back from Brenda's life and in order to give her a fresh start, and she purchased a secluded £250,000 cliff-top house called Red Sands in the small fishing village of Loo. With Noy finally back in Britain, many of the other Brinks-Mat bullion gang members must have hoped that the police inquiries would slow down. They would have been able to sit back for the first time in years and start to plan their futures with tens of millions of pounds of money laundered from the missing gold. Mickey McAvoy and Brian Robinson had been following Kenneth Noy's exploits, especially closely from their prison cells. They had become increasingly enraged by Noy's continual hogging of the newspaper headlines. Not only did it cause them aggro with the police, but it also rankled them with Noy, and that was all best known of all for the so-called Brinks-Mat gang. And he hadn't even been directly involved with the robbery itself. As one southeast London face explained, Mickey and Brian considered Noy to be a walking disaster. He just didn't seem to be able to keep out of trouble, and that in turn caused them a lot more aggravation. They were sick of hearing of Noy, and they felt he was the main reason why the police's Brinks-Mat inquiry was still going on 15 years after they were given hefty prison sentences. Both men continued to go out their way to keep a clean sheet inside, less as long last in prison, because they were patiently biding their time in the expectation that many millions of pounds awaited for them on the outside when they were released. Even when other inmates at the prison had attempted a mass breakout, the two Brinks-Mat kingpins had kept their low profile. 30 prisoners had barricaded themselves on a landing after guards foiled their escape bid. As a consequence of this, other security breaches, the prison was upgraded to a maximum security prison. But staff noted that McAvoy and Robertson had played no absolute role in the trouble whatsoever. All of the countless theories, rumours and innuendo about the circumstances behind the so-called road rage killing of motorist Stephen Cameron were soon to be put to the test as Kenneth Noy walked into the number 2 court of the Old Bailey on the Thursday, the 30th of March 2000. Nearly 4 years after the fatal incident on the M25, gone was the confident swagger that had characterised Noy's last appearance in the same dock 14 years earlier. This time, Noy was grey-haired and dressed in a grey cardigan. He sat hunched like an old man in the dock, surrounded by 3 prison officers, his eyes constantly panning the jury of 8 women and 4 men. Before the case could proceed, Judge Lord Justice Latham ordered round-the-clock protection for each juror. Noy pleaded not guilty to the murder charge and insisted the killing had been an act of self-defence. But as prosecuting counsel Julian Bevan QC informed in the court, Noy was angry about the way that the van was being driven. Immediately after the stabbing, Kenneth Noy got back in his vehicle, a Land Rover Discovery, and sped off along the M25, leaving a dying Stephen by the road. Now, the Crown's case is that the stabbing to death was not merely unlawful; it was a murder. Mr. Bevan referred to how the driver of the passing Rolls Royce had seen Noy smile after he'd stabbed Stephen Cameron to death. When the man later gave evidence, many believed he was putting his life on the line by coming out about what he had claimed he had seen. The court also heard how Noy had claimed throughout those earlier extradition proceedings in Spain that he was not the killer. But Mr. Bevan told the court he now admits he was the person who held the knife and stabbed Stephen Cameron. Noy barely even moved a muscle when the prosecutors pointed to photos of huge splashes of red on Stephen Cameron's van. On the 7th of April 2000, Noy took centre stage in the trial, looking calm and collected, but wiping his nose with a spotless white handkerchief. He strolled confidently to the witness box. Noy's testimony was delivered in an atmosphere of hushed expectation. He spoke in a dull, expressionless monotone. Just a couple of feet away from Stephen Cameron's parents never took their eyes off the man who'd killed their beloved son. Noy claimed he mistook Stephen Cameron and his girlfriend for a couple he knew. That's why he stopped his car. He also insisted that when he'd apologised to Cameron for the mistake, the younger man had said, You will be, you cunt. I'll kill you." Noy said that Cameron had kicked him in the waist and he tried to punch him back. He said Cameron also pushed him. Then Cameron punched him on the cheek. Noy told the court as he fell to the ground when the younger man had began kicking him and saying he was going to kill him. Shortly after that, Noy got his knife out. Noy even carried out his own dramatic reenactment of the incident in the witness box in front of Stephen Cameron's visibly distraught parents. Noy demonstrated the underarm jabbing motion with which he had killed the unarmed man. He claimed he had pulled the knife out from his trouser pocket and told Cameron, "Don't come near me, you nutcase." Noy then told the jury his girlfriend was shouting, "Get off. I'm saying, hold up. And he's lying. I want to kill you. I cannot fight. I'm a fit man, but I was exhausted. I thought I can't take much more. Nobody's trying to stop the fight, not that they could have stopped him anyway. Then I thought if she catches me again, he will take the knife out of my hand and definitely use it on me. So I struck out with the knife. I had put my head down. I just went like, well, demonstrating with a round arm jab. I can't exactly remember how I done it. We were very close together, and I just struck out. I can only remember striking it out, but I accepted it was twice. He definitely knew I had the knife. Noy told the jury he kept a knife by his side every day because he feared being attacked by criminals in league with the police or being kidnapped and forced to reveal the whereabouts of the missing Brinks-Mat gold. Noy claimed he was frequently stopped by the police following his release from prison in 1994. It was at that point that he smiled for about the only time during the trials. He described how they regularly kept him under surveillance. They used to follow me around quite a lot. Immediately after claiming he'd killed Stephen Cameron in self-defence, Noy then shocked the court by revealing to the jury that he'd stood trial for the murder of undercover policeman John Forden. He said he'd killed Forden for similar reasons, but Noy denied that by the time of the Cameron killing, he knew full well that a thrust of a 4-inch blade could easily kill another human being. He was then asked, after saying that after that ghastly experience, you didn't realise it could kill. Noy replied, I appreciate it could kill, but I didn't know where I had to thrust the blade. Noy also admitted using the name of Anthony Francis and using a false address for registering ownership of the Land Rover Discovery. I didn't want to know where I lived, he told the jury. I didn't want no one to know what cars I owned. Okay. Paul. Okay, I just want to do something. Okay, let me continue. Sorry. Right, Noy's composure cracked only once when prosecutor Mr. Bevan probed him on the reasons for stabbing Stephen Cameron. You believed he would take the knife off you? Asked Mr. Bevan. Yes, replied Noy. What, and slit your throat? Asked Mr. Bevan. Noy was rattled by the melodramatic response and said, No. Let's just leave it there, shall we? Said Mr. Bevan. Then Noy snapped, No, we won't leave it there. We will get this sorted out right now. The court was then dumbstruck when Noy broke down and was close to tears as he described the moment he learned from his wife that Stephen Cameron had died. Noy also insisted that he had never hurt anybody. I have never even hurt an animal. But under cross-examination, he admitted he had deliberately stabbed Cameron and explained why he carried the knife. Added, I would have preferred a stun gun or a CS gas canister, but they could be illegal. One witness in court claimed that the victim was a violent man and then confessed to having become close friends with Noy's son Kevin since the road rage attack. He had even admitted that the Noy family had paid for his stay at a hotel during the trial. On the afternoon of Tuesday, 11th April, Bevan gave his closing speech to the court and accused Noy of inventing an exaggerating his version of what actually happened during the killing of Stephen Cameron. Judge Lord Justice Latham told the jury that they would retire to decide on one of the 4 verdicts: guilty of murder, not guilty of murder, and guilty of manslaughter. Not guilty of murder, but guilty of manslaughter by reasons of provocation, or not guilty. The judge also reminded the jury that a person was entitled to defend himself, and such force as was reasonable in the circumstances. The person had honesty to believe that he was under attack. The key point was at the moment when the knife was to be used, the judge said, if you were satisfied he was not acting in the honest belief it was necessary, but it was in retaliation to carry on a fight, the use of the knife was unlawful. The judge then pointed out that the jury might conclude the use of the knife was instinctive and that Noy did not intend to cause serious injury, but risk causing Stephen Cameron some harm. If that were so, then they could return the verdict of manslaughter. The jury finally sent out on the morning of the 13th of April, accompanied by armed police bodyguards. The 8 women and 4 men were sent to the overnight hotel following almost a day of deliberation. The next morning, the judge advised the jury that he would accept the majority verdict and asked them to come back into court midday for an update on their progress. When the jury finally reappeared, they had reached a majority verdict of 11-1, guilty of murder. Noy let out a deep gasp and held his head in his hands. Lord Justice Latham told Noy, the jury, having found you guilty of murder, there is only one sentence I can impose, and that is one of life imprisonment. Noy looked unsteady on his feet as 3 burly police officers led him down the 21 steps from the dock to the dock of number 2 court in the cells below. A few minutes later, a van, its siren blaring, took him back to Belmarsh prison. In the hours following the verdict, it emerged that Noy's defence, estimated to have cost £500,000 to £1 million, had been funded by the taxpayer after he had been granted legal aid because on paper he was no longer worth a penny. McAvoy and Robinson heard of the news of Noy's sentencing with relief. They wanted Noy out the way, said one old associate. He had caused enough damage now, and it was going to be their turn to enjoy the life on the outside after nearly 20 years behind bars. As one of McAvoy's old associates explained, Mickey and Brian had served their time like true professionals. They believed that they had earned their freedom and a nice life with the proceeds of the robbery. Noy was inside where he belonged, in their opinion, because he'd gone completely over the top during the previous years and caused a lot of problems for everyone else. Just as Noy's trial was wrapping up in the late spring of 2000, Brinks-Mat associate Mickey Green's Irish lawyer was shadowed by UK customs agents in Barcelona, where he was engaged in legitimate business. The agents had been investigating Green's links to the mafia and Colombian cartels. There's a massive worldwide network of importing narcotics into Britain. When Green turned up at the Ritz Hotel in the city, he was immediately arrested by UK customs and Spanish police and transported to the nation's most secure jail in the capital, Madrid. At first, both Spanish and UK police hailed the arrest at the end of Green's career as a criminal. One Costa del Sol detective even said, at the time, Green's luck has finally run out. He'll go back to Britain to face music. An extradition hearing was set for Green, and it seemed like a formality that he'd be heading home to London for doing a long stretch inside. Besides being wanted in the UK, Green also still faced a long prison sentence back in France for earlier drug offences. It emerged that Green had invested many millions of pounds in legitimate businesses in Spain, but that much of it had been on behalf of several of the Brinks-Mat gang. Some of the proceeds of the robbery had also helped finance a number of multi-million-pound drug deals set up by Green on the Costa del Sol. But Mickey Green wasn't known as the Pimpernel for nothing. A few months later, after his dramatic arrest in Barcelona, the Spanish court refused to extradite him. The Spanish authorities insisted the UK customs did not have enough concrete evidence to mount a prosecution. So Mickey Green was once again a free man. Rumours of bribes swept across the Costa del Sol, but as customs source later told this author, well, it's sickening to admit, but smuggling charges against Green were dropped after we decided that the evidence from a former associate of Green's called Michael was not strong enough to bring a prosecution back in Britain. It was Michael's arrest by customs officers back in 1998 that had him convinced them to go after Green, because Michael had named Green as a Mr. Big of the world, drug underworld. At Michael's eventual trial at the Old Bailey in 2001, prosecutors Nicholas Lorraine Smith named Mickey Green as a major drug baron. He said He said of Green, he was and continues to be involved in importing large amounts of drugs into this country. It was said after Michael's trial that Green had recruited Michael to head the British end of the huge cocaine and cannabis smuggling racket that they had both made millions in the process. Following his arrest and the subsequent court case, Michael had good reason to fear the wrath of Mickey Green. It was alleged in the court that Green had links to the murders of two other criminals with Brinks-Mat connections. One was the A-Team's hitman, Gilbert Winter, who disappeared from his North London home in 1998. As we've seen, his body is thought to be in the foundations of the Millennium Dome. The other murder victim, with links to Green, was a finance chief of the A-Team who was shot dead outside his home. Informant Michael told UK customs investigators that both men were killed after a double crossing. Green and the A-Team in a £500,000 cannabis deal. Okay, so is you there? We've got the Supergrass Michael. That's right, and Mickey Green, who is known as the Pimpernel. So, Michael's, as I say, he's a Supergrass. He's given all this information, but you've got there how Mickey Green was allegedly linked to those murders. As I say, there's no proof of that. It is, as I say, a lot of it is hearsay. But Gilbert Winter was one who was an Adams family enforcer, and you've got the finance man who was selling a home as well. So back in the outside world, for the first time in 20 years, Mad Mickey McEvoy was already living up his fearsome reputation. He'd slipped out of prison virtually unannounced around the time of Noy's sentencing, which ironically had diverted press attention from his release. For the first few months following at the end of his sentence, he kept a predictably low profile, knowing full well that the police would be on his tail and they still wanted to find out the rest of where the Brinks-Mat gold was. Behind the scenes, McEvoy put out the messages to the relevant parties that he was expecting his share of the gold to be delivered to him at the right moment. The responses he started to get back made it clear that he was not going to be handed to him on a plane. That's when McEvoy decided it was time to flex his muscles. If the gold wasn't going to be brought to him, then he'd go looking for it himself. And God help anyone that got in his way. On Thursday, the 5th of October, 2000, Big Al, the cardboard heved 20-stone frame into a passenger seat of his son's Peugeot with great difficulty. He was more used to driving around in the vintage Jag, once owned by a legendary gangster, Reggie Cray. As he checked the time on his gold Rolex, a man holding a gun equipped with a silencer pulled alongside him in the car park of Halford Store in Ashford, Kent. Before the DeCabrel even had a chance to plead for his life, two shots rang out and his huge blubbery body slumped against the dashboard. Terrified shoppers fled in fear for their lives, but they had nothing to worry about. The shooter had carried out this job with cold professionalism and immediately left the scene. Months earlier, DeCabrel had dared to give police an eyewitness account of Kenneth Noy's stabbing of motorist Stephen Cameron, and then even appeared at the Noy's Old Bailey trial to give the evidence. As a result, it seems that DeCabrel had signed his own death warrant. Yet another killing had left a bloody trail that led directly to the Brinks-Mat gang. One of the most remarkable aspects of the DeCabrel killing was that a few people seemed surprised. So few people seemed surprised. The Kent criminal fraternity was positively underwhelming by this cold-blooded killing in their midst. DeCabrel had been sailing close to the wind for years as a petty villain, but when he stepped forward and fingered Noy, he was opening up a can of murderous worms, and they believed he even knew that it was coming. But then Kent and South East London still remained virtually a law unto itself. The power and influence of the Brinks-Mat gang had a number of other legendary faces made Kent the perfect gateway for the lucrative markets of Europe, drug markets. One retired bank robber even made a small fortune running an unofficial ferry service from a tiny port near Dover across to Holland, where the drug barons would then get off for company meetings in Amsterdam before slipping back into the UK unnoticed. You could get in and out of Europe without the cozzers knowing anything about your movements, explained retired cannabis smuggler Gordon Scott. The fellow who ran it from his tasty motor launch, complete with bedrooms, a fully stocked bar, and he'd even bring on the dancing girls if you booked well in advance. Now, the area of the Kent countryside stretches from Kenneth Noyes' one-time hometown of West Down past Biggin Hill and its handy airstrip, and across to Swanley was known to detectives as the Bermuda Triangle. As one senior officer explained, things that went in and out, and the habit of never coming out again. And we were talking about everything from people to lorry loads of bootlegged fags and booze, not to mention gold. The construction of the nearby M25 had meant easy access to the Bermuda Triangle at all times of the day and the night. Detectives fully intended to interview Mad Mickey McAvoy about the DeCabrel killing because there was a suspicion that he might have had something interesting to say about it, but in the end there was no evidence to link him to the murder. Perhaps someone deliberately killed DeCabrel, knowing it would look as if it had been commissioned by Noy. It was no secret that McAvoy wanted to make sure Noy never got released from jail. As one South London Underworld source explained, thinking about it, it does make sense. It would explain why the execution was carried out in such a public manner. Also, a lot of chaps had the incentive to frame Noy. A few months later, after DeCabrel's murder, detectives searching for the Brinks-Mat gold were tipped off about a burial site on the south coast. Officers used high-tech imaging equipment to search a timber yard at the rear of a builders merchants in Greystone Lane off London Road in Hastings, East Sussex. After initially conducting virtually a fingertip search, a pneumatic drill was used to dig deeper in the covered yard. A Scotland Yard spokeswoman told reporters at the scene, "The search is based on the information we have received following a lengthy inquiry which has lasted many months. I cannot say exactly what we are looking for. The drill has been used to dig into the concrete floor of the yard, but nothing was ever found. There was a deep suspicion that the original tip was yet another red herring presented to the Brinks-Mat detectives, simply to divert them away from the path. There were many occasions when the police thought that they had a breakthrough in search for the Brinks-Mat gold. One time detectives went digging for it out in the farm, East Sussex, following a tip-off from an informant. The cat and mouse games were continuing, even though it was nearly 20 years since the original robbery. Now, in early 2001, Kenneth Noy lost his appeal against a life sentence for the Cameron killing. Friends and associates that had kept appealing on all fronts because he was determined to get released from prison, eventually for what he saw as a miscarriage of justice. A later appeal was granted in the autumn of 2010, but in 2011 his sentence was upheld. But even as Noy's case returned to court, the killings continued. The shooting in broad daylight of the 63-year-old Brinks-Mat robber Brian Perry, as he got out of his car in Bermondsey, South East London, sent a shiver of fear through the underworld. A masked hitman dressed in dark clothes shot Perry in the head, chest and back. Perry was found lying in a pool of his own blood after local residents heard the gunshots just after 1 p.m. The masked assassin was seen escaping in a dark grey or blue Ford Escort fitted with false number plates. It sped off towards Old Kent Road shortly after the shooting. Perry had been murdered in cold blood right in the heart of his home territory. Whoever commissioned the hit was sending out a very clear message. Many detectives and gangsters believed Perry's death was yet evidence of the deadly ongoing feud between members of the Brinks-Mat gang. It also sent out a terrifying warning to other villains. One source very close to many of the gang told this author certain people wanted their share of the gold. When it wasn't there waiting for them, they started to get very upset. So Detective Superintendent John Stratford, the new head of the flying squad, led the investigation into Perry's brutal killing. The day after the murder, a Scotland Yard spokesman admitted, "We believe this may be connected to the Brinks-Mat robbery, and we're still looking for proceeds from the incident. Detectives investigating the hit on Perry sought out Mad Mickey McAvoy for questioning. Also, they insisted it did not imply he was responsible for the murder." Okay. Hello, Paul. Let's just quickly answer your question. Dave Bermondsey, Dave Courtney was from South London. I'm not sure whereabouts, but I think he might have been Bermondsey. I'll find out for him. He was a South London man. He sadly passed away. He was actually from Forest Hill, Paul. He was born in Forest Hill, but he died in Plumstead, so it's not too far from Bermondsey anyway. Okay. So Perry had earlier served a 9-year prison sentence for his role in the laundering the profits from the Brinks-Mat raid. It was strongly rumoured at the time of his death Perry knew where at least 10 million worth of gold from the heist had been hidden. Perry knew where so one source also claimed that Perry was suspected of secretly aiding the police in their inquiries. That may have been the last straw as far as his enemies were concerned. A lot of people were saying that Perry was helping the causers, and one Brinks-Mat associate, he signed his own death warrant if that really was the case. So the cycle of death and destruction continued. A few months later, Perry's death, 2 of his oldest associates were murdered separately near the busy Kent ports of Chatham and Rochester. John Bistow, 39, and Ray Chapman, 44, had both bought boats shortly before they were killed. And in the southeast London Underworld, it was said that the men had been bigging it up with wads of cash that they'd said Perry had given them for their services rendered. McAvoy insisted to anyone who would listen that he just wanted to lead a quiet life after finally getting out of prison. Naturally, other criminals tried to implicate him. McAvoy insisted that these rumours were untrue. On the 16th of November 2001, Joseph Pitkin, 31 of Verulam Avenue, and Bila Akhtar, 22 from Canning Road in Walthamstow, East London, both pleaded not guilty to the murder of Brian Perry. Prosecutor Richard Whittam said Perry's connection to the £26 million robbery may or may not have been the reason for his murder. Prosecutors alleged Pitkin shot Perry while Akhtar drove the getaway car. Neither man had any motive to kill Perry, which included both Mr. Pitkin's and Mr. Akhtar's. But in the end, the trial was abandoned and both men acquitted after the prosecution admitted the only evidence available was circumstantial. Less lucky was John Palmer, who was in court again, this time on charges of committing what prosecutors described as the largest timeshare fraud on record. It was alleged that he'd swindled 20,000 people out of 30 million. The legal team representing Palmer at his trial claimed that he'd been persecuted because of his alleged links to the Brinks-Mat robbery. Following his conviction for conspiracy to defraud, his lawyers promised a vigorous and full appeal to the state. Palmer had been sentenced to 8 years in jail. He was also ordered to hand over 2.7 million in compensation to his victims. Palmer's legal representative, Giovanni Di Stefano, said that the 52-year-old intended to pay the compensation, but it would appeal all other charges. Mr. Di Stefano admitted, "We as lawyers can never predict the outcome, but we anticipate and sincerely hope that justice will not only be done, but be seen to be done regardless of whether he is John Palmer, John Smith, or anyone." Palmer had denied the fraud allegations against him throughout his trial. Palmer insisted he'd been specifically targeted by the police because of his alleged involvement in the smelting down of the Brinks-Mat gold. Mr. Di Stefano added, "Brinks-Mat will always be with him." I'm sad to say his acquittal has led to a persecution rather than a prosecution. However, police claimed that Palmer, who often wore body armour, was connected to the Russian mafia and led a criminal gang involved in fraud, money laundering, drug trafficking, bribery, possessing firearms, and falsifying passports and credit cards. To add to Palmer's difficulties, there were strong rumours across the London Underworld that he'd fallen out with Kenneth Noy after Palmer had lent him his private jet following the murder of motorist Stephen Cameron on the M25. Noy and Palmer were said by sources in the London Underworld to be at daggers with each other, and as a result, both men were kept in separate prisons for their own safety. Noy was under round-the-clock guard in top security Whitemore prison in Cambridgeshire, while Palmer remained in an undisclosed jail. Hundreds of Palmer's timeshare victims sued him for more than 3 million, and in 2005 he was declared bankrupt in the United Kingdom with debts of nearly 4 million. Palmer was eventually freed after serving half of his sentence. Few had any doubt that he would return to crime, not at least his victims, and creditors were hounding him for money. In 2007, he was again arrested on a number of charges, including fraud, after being held for 2 years in the high-security Spanish jail without charge. He was released on bail, but was ordered to report to court authorities every 2 weeks. Now, one of the most extraordinary aspects of the entire Brinks-Mat saga is that he never strayed out of the public eye for long, and it was still the case. It was still the case today, nearly 20 years after the first crime was committed, as Detective Tony London told the author of this book. Brinks-Mat had its extraordinary ripple effect on so many other investigations and crimes. It seemed to gain momentum rather than slow down as the years passed. But this notoriety meant that some of the less important faces with links to the Brinks-Mat robbery found themselves in trouble, even if their profile wasn't as high as of that of the core Brinks-Mat team. Now, take Clifford Norris, a slim, almost fragile man of no more than 5'7". Norris had at one time been involved with a multi-million-pound drug empire, which had been at least partly financed by the Brinks-Mat money. At the age of 30, Norris was a key figure in South East London's drug trade. He owned an expensive mock Tudor mansion and drove flashy cars. Norris later admitted he made mistakes and the drug empire he was in was out of control. When many of the years of the robbery, he crossed a couple of the Brinks-Mat gang over a drug deal. Norris went on the run in August 1994. Police followed his wife down to a holiday cottage in East Sussex, where Norris was hiding. Officers also stumbled upon next to a set of golf clubs a silenced Ingram submachine gun. After 5 years in hiding from both criminals and police, he'd finally been tracked down. Norris was sentenced to 9.5 years for drug and firearms offences. On his release in 2001, rumours gradually surfaced that Clifford Norris had tried to reunite with his former Brinks-Mat pals, but Norris was warned in no uncertain terms to keep away. He eventually ended up living in a single room of a mud-coloured hostel above a DIY shop on a job seeker's allowance of £56.20 a week. The only way he could guarantee he would stay away and walk free from all his stolen riches and return to the world, which proved a much harsher place. Now, the police continued to keep a close eye on all the Brinks-Mat gang, especially those who had been released from prison over the previous couple of years in 2003. Gold handler Michael Lawson, one of Noy's best friends, was convicted of running a multi-million-pound drug smuggling operation, but acquitted after an appeal and retrial. However, the authorities accused him of laundering the proceeds of drug smuggling through buying and selling houses and land. They had a sneaking suspicion that Lawson was still using proceeds from the original Brinks-Mat robbery for some of his criminal enterprises, but no charges were ever brought to him. Now, on the 14th of May, 2003, Brinks-Mat gang member George Francis, now 63, was gunned down at point-blank range as he sat in his car outside the courier business he ran in southeast London. He should have known better after being injured by another shooter 17 years earlier. But Georgie boy reckoned he was untouchable. Murder Squad detectives immediately sought out Mick McAvoy to ask him about Francis's execution, but there was no evidence linking McAvoy to any of the Brinks-Mat murders since his release from prison. Despite having no obvious job, McAvoy seemed to have a comfortable lifestyle. He often flew to the Costa del Sol, where he had access to a luxury mansion. Brinks-Mat insurance investigator Bob McCann, who spent years tracking the missing gold, later said he believed that both Francis and Perry were probably quite literally fishing for gold, and they got too close. One retired Brinks-Mat detective explained soon after the Francis shooting, Georgie was another man in the know, and he paid for it with his life. One by one, those involved are being picked off like targets at a funfair shooting gallery. It's bloody terrifying that this sort of thing still goes on in so-called civilized society. Okay. Right. Okay, right. I'm going to wrap that up there. I'm just going to go through, pawn and scrap scrap gold shops. Yeah, a lot of them did, Paul. Is that George Francis you're talking about? As I say, yeah, he got gunned down. That was the second attempt it took them to kill him, but 17 years apart. George Francis. Palmer, yeah. Palmer was killed later on. Yeah, he did. He did. He was a gold dealer. That was his main thing. Yeah. He was buying and selling gold. That's where he made his money, and then he got involved in the Brinks-Mat. As he did the timeshare fraud. He was. I think it was 2016. It might have been a bit later than that. It doesn't cover it in this book, but Palmer was murdered. Yeah. I'll have a look at that now. Yeah, it was actually in 2015. He was killed because at first, I don't know if you remember seeing it, but it was reported that he had a heart attack, and then they actually by investigating further, yeah, he was gunned down. They reckon that there was a hole in the fence that someone who had been casing him, doing a reconnaissance mission, was watching him for all that time, and then eventually they killed him. That's right, Joe. Yeah, they've been monitoring him, watching what he was doing. I mean, I don't know. There was loads of rumours going around, which, as there always is in this type of thing, that on who did it and done what. But John Palmer had his finger in so many pies. He could have put so many noses out of joint. It could have been any one of them that had him knocked off. But yeah, that's pretty much. It's a fascinating story, the Brinks-Mat. That's right, Paul. Yeah, and as you can see, just through the drama of it all, and the money, I guess they were always looking over their shoulders. Exactly. The thing is, right, that when they're having that money, just think you can't walk down the street without a care in the world. They say they can't, but you're forever looking over your shoulder, worrying about who's ringing on your door. So they're changing their ID, they're getting falsifying passports. It's no fun living like that, you know. But yeah, as I say, it was what it engineered, that robbery, from the drugs to the timeshares to a whole number of events, and funding more crimes and more stories. It will never be reciprocated, and in some ways that's a good thing. But also you've got to appreciate, exactly, live by the sword, die by the sword. But you've got to appreciate, you know, some of the thinking, even though it's against the law, the way that they did the VAT scams, the way that they got hands on the smelter, how they mixed the copper in with the gold. Then they were able to bribe someone and get someone to sign it off with a new assay number, and then resell it back into the gold market. You know, a lot of that's not just your average criminal. You need to be smart to do that, and you've also got to have the right people around. You've got to know the right people. And so in that sense, I kind of tip my hat off to people like that, in that they're not, you know, they've got that, they're that clever that they can do things like that. Obviously, crime doesn't pay. That's not what I'm saying. But I just really, you know, the expertise around that. You've got to admire that. But yeah, it's certainly interesting. I'm gonna, as I say, this is the final chapter. I want to say thank you for you all. I am, as I say, I will be moving around onto different topics. So, Paul, I'm just going to do something for you now. Okay. Right. So, yeah, thank you, Delilah. Well, this is it. This is it. Nothing wrong with that, Paul. Going to church, devoted to God. It's a good thing. As I say, I'm going to be doing a variety show. I'm going to be covering things like travel. I do like to get your feedback, obviously, as well. I consider those of you that come round as part of the show, so I can cover more topics in crime as well. But I could do other bits and bobs. I always appreciate your feedback, because obviously it helps me go on and, you know, making sure that I'm getting out the right content for you. So please feel free to let me know what you want me to do. You know, it's good that I have your support in the chat, and I just want to thank you all for coming. Thank you, Delilah. Is there anyone got any questions? Thank you, Paul. No questions? Okay. Speak now. No problem at all, Delilah. So I'm going to say, speak now or forever hold your peace. Those of you in the UK, I'm sure we've all got working tomorrow. Have a lovely evening. Those of you in the US, as I say, it's probably dinner time now, so enjoy it and have a lovely evening. So thank you all, and I will catch up with you all soon. Thank you. God bless. I will do, Joe. Thank you. I'll do that. I'm going to do a bit of travel next. I'll keep the topics varied. I'll also help me. It will help me know where my strengths and weaknesses are. Thank you all.